Welcome to the Habit Chess podcast. My name is Misbah, and in today's episode, I'm going to be diving into some of the highlights and annotations and notes that I took from reading this book. And the reason I want to share this book with you and what I learned from it is because I think it's an important one for the main topic that we talk about on this show, which is skill acquisition and the concept of learning how to learn. There are tons of gems in this book that I honestly didn't expect to uncover when I first started reading it, but it's one of those where, I finished it relatively quickly, and I have dozens of notes that I'm excited to share with you that I think that you can take with you into whatever skills you are stacking and whatever moves that you are making. The name of the book is called Hidden Potential: The Science of Achieving Greater Things, and it's written by Adam Grant, who is a professor and organizational psychologist at the Wharton School of Business of University of Pennsylvania. And he does a great job on social. If you follow him on any platform, really, it's like the tweet-styled screenshots. He's done a great job over the years of just sharing great doses of information that feel like you are, sitting in a class of his, getting access to his brilliant mind. But I think what's even better is getting it in the form of a book like this, especially on a topic like this. The first highlight that I have to share with you is what look like differences in natural ability are often differences in opportunity and motivation. And I found this one fascinating because a paragraph or two before this, it says, recent evidence underscores the importance of conditions for learning. To master a new concept in math, science, or foreign language, it typically takes 7 or 8 practice sessions, and that number of reps held across thousands of students from elementary school all the way through college. I found this fascinating because 8 sessions is not a wild amount, and you could take that concept to being very similar to the whole spend 20 hours, spend 30 hours learning something. Don't think so hard about the 10,000 hour rule. See what happens with 20 hours of focused effort with the tools and tech that's available to you today. What actually happens, right? And so this was interesting because that's another note that's been kind of on my mind recently when it comes to skill acquisition. But seeing the number of 7 or 8 sessions, was actually super interesting. And I really like this quote on potential, which I think is pretty important, and it sets kind of the tone for the book, right? Potential is not a matter of where you start, but of how far you travel. We need to focus less on starting points and more on distance traveled. The reason that I really like this one is because I've always admired people who have to travel great distances to get to the same exact position. It makes you wonder, how do they do it? What capacities did they have to stretch to be able to do that? Versus somebody who was born to do it, right? Somebody who has nurtured it. It has been a little easier for them. But the people who have to overcome insane circumstances, those are the stories. There are tons of them in this book. It's funny, that leads me to the next highlight, which is people who make major strides are rarely freaks of nature. They're usually freaks of nurture. This to me kind of comes back to that concept of those 7 to 8 sessions that were mentioned in the previous highlight, right? It's basically, how do you get access and how do you make those 8 sessions accessible, even as adults, right? Learning new skills. If you had 8 focused sessions with somebody to help you learn that skill. I really like this paragraph where he goes, this book is not about ambition, it's about aspiration. As the philosopher Agnes Callard highlights, ambition is the outcome you want to attain. Aspiration is the person you hope to become. And I had to sit with that one for a second because it makes sense. Like, a lot of people are ambitious. If you're listening to the show, chances are that you are ambitious, towards the outcomes or outcome that you want to attain. But I think that there's also probably something you can resonate with, which is the type of person that you want to become in that process, right? It's almost a lasting effect of like the satisfaction of gaining a skill. It's like, now I have this skill forever. That's kind of what I loved about my career in fitness, was I got to learn so many things just on the job and get paid for it that were things that I could take with me into the next several decades of my life, hopefully, you know? And so this part's really interesting. The capacities to be proactive, prosocial, disciplined, and determined stayed with students longer and ultimately proved more powerful than early math and reading skills. So obviously math and reading skills seem like, okay, this is unlocking a whole new world, right? This is the basis of everything. If you learn how to read, you can learn other things, right? Obviously, you think about math and reading, you're like, what could be more important than math or reading, right? But to see these cognitive skills that fourth grade teachers and eighth grade teachers, helped some of these students develop, and they turn out to be more important. Again, that is proactive, which is how often did they take initiative or ask questions, volunteer answers, seek information from books, and engage the teacher to learn outside the class. Prosocial, how well did they get along and collaborate with peers? Discipline, how effectively did they pay attention and resist the impulse to disrupt class? And then determined, how consistently did they take on challenging problems, do more than the assigned work, and persist in the face of obstacles? To me, that is such a beautiful summary of, maybe I have one or two of those things, right? But to see that, okay, I could develop the other one or two. And you know how people say, when there's a will, there's a way? So there's a sentence here. What we overlook is that when people can't see a path, they stop dreaming of the destination. To ignite their will, we need to show them the way. That's what scaffolding can do, right? The very doors that societies are supposed to open to people with great potential are often wrongly closed to those who have faced the greatest obstacles. I find this to be something that is cool that is being talked about, because you know that Jamie Dimon of, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, is basically, he talked about how they hire people who, have a criminal record, like not crazy serial killers or violent crimes and stuff like that, but people who, have faced hardship and come from different backgrounds. And because you bring a different level of problem solving in many cases when you have had to go through, some of those obstacles. And so since this book is about potential, I thought that was great, is the last line of this one chapter. This is an amazing reminder for anybody who's, you look up to people on social or, in any skill that you're solving. And so there's this paragraph here. When we admire great thinkers, doers, and leaders, we often focus narrowly on their performance. That leads us to elevate the people who have accomplished the most and overlook the ones who have achieved the most with the least. The true measure of your potential is not the height of the peak you've reached, but how far you've climbed to get there. The person who had to climb a little farther to get there, I bet you they have, 5 different errors that they could warn you about. This next one is about character and personality. So character is often confused with personality, but they're not the same. Personality is your predisposition, your basic instincts for how to think, feel, and act. Character is your capacity to prioritize your values over your instincts. The next paragraph, it says, if personality is how you respond on a typical day, character is how you show up on a hard day. And I thought this was really nice because I did this exercise recently where I kind of rewrote all of my top values, company values and stuff as well, but also personal values and things like that. I think having them listed out in general is a great way to begin. It doesn't mean you're going to prioritize your values over your instincts just automatically, but you are more likely to, right? And you can begin to trend in that direction. This often leads to a lot more satisfaction, even during the hard times, even during hard tasks, right? So having kind of this list gives you something to even practice. I think without it, you kind of just, they're loose concepts in your mind, or they're things that sound good culturally or societally, but they aren't really maybe your true values. And so taking some time to do that, I think it took me, a few hours, maybe even a week or two of like refining before I felt like it was solidified to a place where I was happy with, but definitely worth doing. Okay, now this one is a game changer. So becoming a creature of discomfort can unlock hidden potential in many different types of learning. Summoning the nerve to face discomfort is a character skill, an especially important form of determination. It takes three kinds of courage: to abandon your tried and true methods, to put yourself in the ring before you feel ready, and to make more mistakes than others make attempts. The best way to accelerate growth is to embrace, seek, and amplify discomfort. I think that this is just such a beautiful, especially that line right there about making more mistakes than others make attempts. That should hit you hard, because it can feel like, oh man, everybody's doing the same thing. Everybody's doing more. Everybody's catching up to me. I'm behind, right? But when you really look around sometimes and you get used to, embracing the discomfort and taking action anyway, right? Because I think oftentimes when you're learning new things and you have to show up despite not being good, that's when it's the hardest, right? If you are creating online, you have to show up for a while where you get nothing, even though your stuff might be good, but you have to show up and push through that discomfort. Don't get me wrong. Who wants to be uncomfortable, right? It's not a natural thing to be like, yes, I want to do that, right? But if you, especially in certain regards, there will always be a couple areas that, you would prefer not to expose yourself to more discomfort. And you could do without it, probably, right? But in some of the areas where you are trying to push yourself, you're trying to grow, you're trying to expand your skill set or your capacity, remember, if you can develop the capacity to, I always say that it's like, if you can be okay looking dumb, right? Especially temporarily. Like, a lot of people can't stand the thought of looking stupid or looking, just another way than what they hope people see them as, right? But at the same time, if you notice that the people who put themselves in that position, they grow at a rapid pace. And I think it's because of this whole idea of like, you're not a rock, you're a sponge. Those people are absorbing information, they're wringing it out, they're absorbing more information, even though it's uncomfortable, right? Versus the rock is like, you can see the discomfort all over the rock. It's jagged, it's hard, it's stiff, so what is this thing, right? And so I want to clarify, it's not easy, right? But if you can think about it that way, where you can normalize making survivable mistakes, I say that all the time, but make survivable mistakes, that becomes a superpower, because it frees up your brain in a way to try. Whereas before, making the mistake was the fear that you had the entire time. And now you might be exposing yourself to a crazy volume of that, where it doesn't even matter. Like, you don't care if you make the mistake, because you're going to iterate, you're going to fix it on the next one, right? And so having the courage to do that while everyone else is afraid and still focusing on trying to make the attempt, trying to sound perfect, trying to look good, trying to, wait for the perfect time, the perfect day, you have such an advantage if you can develop that kind of muscle. And what's cool is it's available to us all. It just takes training, and it takes training in the areas that you actually experience this discomfort in, or want to improve, that capacity in. This next one is on writing, which I have been loving recently, but writing is more than a vehicle for communicating. It's a tool for learning. Writing exposes gaps in your knowledge and logic. It pushes you to articulate assumptions and consider counter-arguments. Unclear writing is a sign of unclear thinking. And I think that this is increasingly, it's becoming more of my belief as I practice this every day, that writing is the core skill. If I was to arm somebody with, maybe aside from reading, but like writing in particular, because it's a free and fast way to compress thoughts, to get clear on ideas, to come to consult with yourself and get coaching from yourself, because what you get to put on the page is usually something that's, speaking right back at you in many ways. I think people don't write more because they think of it as this noble practice that like you have to be given permission to do, when really what it means is just opening up the notes app on your phone and jotting down, 5 to 10 words. that can be writing. Okay. Yes, you could expand that into, okay, now let's sit down and journal. Let's think out and solve this problem, this bottleneck that I'm dealing with, right? Okay, that can be another form of writing. But I think that if you begin to make it available to yourself through the notes strategy, where you're just jotting down, getting used to jotting down 10 notes a day, you will begin to see how even just looking at those notes, it will begin to help you do what this is saying. Writing exposes gaps in your knowledge and logic, and it pushes you to articulate assumptions and consider counterarguments. So you see this especially with founders, like why do they go to Twitter and or X and a lot of these writing based platforms? And a lot of founders aren't able to like edit their own stuff or even know how to send out their own newsletters, right? Like they have people who do that for them. But the actual part that they control a lot of the time is writing, okay? And by writing, it isn't always like long novels and pages and books, right? It often is notes, 10-word thoughts, 10-word sentences that little by little allows them to kind of work out the ideas and the skills that they are even trying to build. So use it as a tool for that. So there's this little experiment that they did, and the part I highlighted was, although listening is often more fun, reading improves comprehension and recall. Whereas listening promotes intuitive thinking, reading activates more analytical processing. So it goes on to say, with print, you naturally slow down at the start of a paragraph to process the core idea and use the paragraph breaks and headers to chunk information. Unless you have a reading disability or learning disorder that makes it difficult to parse text, when it comes to critical thinking, there is no substitute for reading. The reason that I love this is because, just as we were just talking about how important writing is, that was the previous highlight, like reading is the thing that unlocks everything. And what's becoming scarier and scarier to me is that the average reading level is going down lower and lower, right? There are more kids growing up today who don't know how to read. And it's the kind of thing where you're getting left behind, right? So remember, if in your given craft, in your given skill, or even outside of it, right? I think that if you can read books that you actually like, that you actually choose, and you can use that to improve the analytical, like sharpen the analytical side of your brain and improve your critical thinking ability, because that is going to be one thing that becomes more and more valued, right? As more and more information is just free and available and everywhere, accelerating learning requires a second form of courage, being brave enough to use your knowledge as you acquire it. And this is the entire idea of putting something into practice as soon as you can. I get why it's saying that that is an accelerator for learning, because you often just learn so much out of failing, and failing in a survivable way, right? In a way that doesn't completely demoralize you, right? But allows you to go, oh, okay, yeah, just try, don't do that next time. Try it this way this time, right? You kind of coach yourself in many ways if you have the courage to push yourself to do that. Okay, so this next section is talking about some research about how even micro breaks of 5 to 10 minutes are enough to reduce fatigue and raise energy. It's not just about preventing burnout. Research reveals that when we work nights and weekends, our interest and enjoyment in our tasks drop. Even just reminding you that it's Saturday is enough to reduce your intrinsic motivation. Second, breaks unlock fresh ideas. In my own research with Jihei Shin, I found that taking breaks boosts creativity when you feel harmonious passion towards a task. Your interest keeps the problem active in the back of your mind, and you're more likely to incubate new ways of framing it and unexpected ways of solving it. This is pretty insane. You know what I mean? Like, just the idea, this is why great ideas come in the shower. They come while you're washing dishes, you're vacuuming, you're doing random things, is because your mind is incubating it while you are doing physically something else. And this is why, if there's one thing you could take away from this, is like, be able to capture it when it comes so that you can turn it into a note instead of it just being a fleeting idea. Ever since I read this, I have actually been testing this, and it works. You do feel, you also feel, I think, less resistance to getting into a task, knowing that a 5 to 10 minute break is coming sometimes, versus when you're like, oh man, I'm going to be locked in here for this 4-hour session with no breaks. So anyways, there was this third highlight here. Third, breaks deepen learning. In one experiment, taking a 10-minute break after learning something improved recall for students by 10 to 30%, and even more for stroke and Alzheimer patients. Okay, so that part is pretty crazy, right? Just take breaks. They're not a distraction, and seeing it in this way of resetting attention and incubating ideas is a game changer. You start to see breaks this way as kind of like an oven where you can let things cook while you are doing something else for a bit. You're going to find this so enjoyable. Like, go take a walk, go do what you were going to do. Like, you don't have to be glued to the computer to be working on that same problem. I love the idea of, yes, it resets attention, but the incubating ideas really appeals to me. A rut is not a sign that you've tanked. A plateau is not a cue that you've peaked. They're signals that it may be time to turn around and find a new route. Gaining momentum often involves backing up and navigating your way down a different road, even if it's not the one you initially intended to travel. It might be unfamiliar, winding, and bumpy. I really like this chapter because he was talking about how skills, they don't just grow at this, linear pace where you just keep getting better and better and better. I liked how he highlighted here that skills don't grow at a steady pace. Improving them is like driving up a mountain. As we climb higher and higher, the road gets steeper and steeper, and our gains get smaller and smaller. When we run out of momentum, we start to stall. It's not enough to step on the gas. Our wheels are spinning, but we've stopped moving. The reason I think this was kind of enlightening was because it's very similar to fitness, right? As somebody's training age is higher, they've been doing it 10, 15 years versus somebody who just began to get into resistance training and it's like they're 10 days in. You see different results, right? After poring over more than a century of evidence on progress, cognitive scientists Wayne Gray and John Lindstedt observed a fascinating arc. When our performance stagnates, before it improves again, it declines. When people's skills stalled in tasks ranging from Tetris to golf to memorizing facts, they didn't usually ascend again until after they had deteriorated. Again, this is coming back to the fitness analogy of like when you work out, what do? Your muscles break down, right? They have to do that. They have to be a little bit damaged before they can repair and grow back into something stronger. And so using a similar line of thinking, it's kind of comforting to know that when you are feeling like, man, I'm not improving, that is actually the key sign that you are in the middle of doing exactly that. This next concept is about the compass. So instead of needing a perfect map of the future and feeling like you need all these steps to get started, there's this beautiful image about, how holding a compass is what you actually need. You need the general direction. And the highlight is, depending on the skill you're trying to learn, you might discover a compass in a book, on the web, or in a conversation. A good compass signals when you're going off course and orients you in a better direction. And, for example, if you begin to stall as you learn to code in C++, you can find a compass in a quick online search that points you towards Python. It's easier to learn and just as well suited to accomplish a wide variety of projects. So what this does is it gives you a way to go, you know what, instead of trying, I'm going to solve problems a different way. I'm going to take an attempt at solving the problem, and then I'm going to have a feedback loop for myself where I can, go consume a blog post, go find the YouTube video, go listen to the podcast, go read the book, right? To me, this was just a great reminder of being able to kind of start small and let your interests kind of carry you into the rest of the steps, where it's like the compass at first is knowing what step 1 and step 2 is, right? By the time you're in step 1 and step 2, all of a sudden that compass might begin leading you, just continuing to lead you in that same direction, right? Where you will get steps 4, 5, and 6. But when you begin to look at a map and you're like, all right, man, I got to go south and I got to go east and make a left here, then a right there. It's a little too much, right? It's a little too much to remember all at once. So often the compass that you might need is a lot smaller and simpler than you might think. Okay, so I found this study pretty wild. Collected data on every freshman at Northwestern University from 2001 to 2008. They investigated whether freshmen did better in their second course in a subject if their introductory class was taught by more qualified instructors. You might assume that students would be better off learning the basics from an expert, a tenure track or tenure professor, than a non-expert, a lecturer with less specialized knowledge. But the data showed the opposite. Students who took their initial class with an expert ended up with poorer grades in the next class, which is insane, right? Now, the pattern was robust across fields. Students learned less from introductory classes taught by experts in every subject. It held across years with over 15,000 students and in courses with tougher as well as easier grading. And the experts were especially bad at teaching students who were less academically prepared. And this was one of my favorite sections because it points out another theory I've observed over the years, which is the curse of knowledge, right? When you interact with people who are the top of what they do, like in athletics, for example, right? The top athlete is not going to be the top coach because the better and better they get, their ability to communicate gets worse and worse. And this is another section that I highlighted, which was pretty cool. This was another section that I highlighted from cognitive scientist Sion Belock. Summarizes it. As you get better and better at what you do, your ability to communicate your understanding or to help others learn that skill often gets worse and worse. And they say that was Einstein's curse in the classroom. He knew too much and his students knew too little. So all of that is important to keep in mind, because if you are getting all of your advice from people who are just the best of the best on the performance side of things in what you're learning, you're not actually getting the best tactical information that you could be to be learning faster, right? So something to keep in mind. Important to have both perspectives, but next time you find yourself being enamored by somebody who's an Einstein, right? Keep in mind when you take advice from them and what they say, take it with a grain of salt, because they're having a difficult time connecting with exactly where you're at because it's been so long since they've been a beginner, right? Oh, I love this part right here. Even if your chosen expert can walk you through their route, when you ask for directions on yours, you'll run into a second challenge. You don't share the same strengths and weaknesses. Their hills and valleys aren't the same as yours. You might be heading for the same destination, but you're starting far from their position. This makes your path as unfamiliar to them as theirs is to you. Okay, this next part kind of reminded me of something that I heard from Sam Altman recently, which was his definition of burnout, which he thinks is too many failures in a row without any successes is when you begin to feel burnout, because there are many times where you've been exhausted or tired, but if you're having success, you have momentum, you feel great, and you can keep going, right? And so the quote here is, there's a name for that feeling. It's called languishing. Languishing is a sense of stagnation and emptiness. The term was coined by a sociologist, Corey Keyes, and immortalized by a philosopher, Mariah Carey. Languishing is the emotional experience of stalling. You may not be depressed or burnt out, but you definitely feel blah. Every day starts with a case of the Mondays. You're muddling through the moments, watching your weeks go by in shades of gray. Okay, this next discovery is going to absolutely blow your mind. So it said here, in one study, when people had spent engaging evenings on their side hustles, they performed better the next day in their regular jobs. The progress they made at night put an extra spring in their step the following morning. The motivation benefits outweighed any distraction costs. Hobbies have similar benefits. In another study, when people took on serious hobbies at home, their confidence climbed at work, but only if the hobbies were in a different area from their jobs. The reason that this is so wild is because it's been believed for years, like, oh, go all in on one thing, right? If you have side hustles or you have hobbies, it's a distraction. But it totally makes sense, right? Especially in cases where you don't need to see a lot of progress either. That's the crazy part, is you just need to have, it says here, of all the factors that have been studied, the strongest known force in daily motivation is a sense of progress. So it doesn't even have to be, well, again, you could actually make it harder for yourself by making the sense of progress be so big and, unrealistic that you never feel like you're making progress. But the whole point is, can you find what gives you that sense of progress even? Because if you can, it's a way to kind of tap into that daily motivation and use it as a natural pep in your step. And I think it's important to note here the fact that the whole hobbies thing, how hobbies have a similar benefit, but it only is helpful if the hobby is in a different area than from their jobs, right? So if you are an artist that's saying and you're languishing, doing ceramics on the side won't do much to spur a sense of mastery. But if you're feeling meh as a social worker, an accountant, a pottery project might just be a new path to progress. So that's the cool thing here. It's like, it's inviting you, the research is inviting you to actually do the thing that you might be a waste of time, because you never know what's going to be on the other end. And if you can classify it as a hobby, right, or just a side hustle, those are beautiful things to have that I think give immense purpose and meaning, especially when you are working, a traditional office job or 9-to-5 job or whatever, right? Like in day-to-day work, I think even if you are a business owner, honestly, it still goes for business owners too. It's like everything you consume at all times eventually becomes work, right? So to have something that you can disconnect with, or that gives you a sense of, just this turbo boost, everyone will wonder how you get that. And it comes from a totally unrelated thing that nobody will ever be able to predict. Psychologists call this the Tutor effect. It's even effective for novices. The best way to learn something is to teach it. You remember it better after you recall it, and you understand it better after you explain it. I think a entry-level way to get into the Tutor effect, if you feel a little too like, I don't have anybody to teach it to yet or whatever, is use your notes as the other person, right? Your notes, the page, is the place where you're going to explain it to somebody. You're explaining it to yourself, right? And it's coming back. You understand it much better. You learn it much better after you explain it. And so that, I find, is a safe entryway into putting yourself out there and getting into a systematic way where you are learning, teaching. You're not feeling like, oh, I need to be this all-knowing thing before I can teach a little bit, right? You're sharing in bits. I think that alone, if you can set up a structure where you can teach, even if it's yourself, just by, taking notes or talking it out to, your friends or family or whatever, right? A specific person who's willing to listen to you, it can massively improve not only your understanding of the skill and what you're learning, but obviously the progress, right? Even just talking it out. I do that all the time. And sometimes you can hear yourself talking in circles, but if you do that, you eventually find a better way to explain it by the third or fourth try. Making progress isn't always about moving forward. Sometimes it's about bouncing back. Progress is not only reflected in the peaks you reach, it's also visible in the valleys you cross. Resilience is a form of growth. Reading is the basic skill for all subjects. Carrie explained, if you don't have the motivation to read, you can't study any other subject. Cultivating the desire to read nourishes individual interests. And this is what I was saying earlier, where if you can get yourself to like it, the same way with writing, I was just saying, like, get yourself to enjoy it a little bit more, it opens up a new world that wasn't even possible for many people. Because anything you're interested in, you now have a way to take it somewhere and develop it. It's not just this random interest. This is a great quote at the beginning of Chapter 9, Diamonds in the Rough, by Booker T. Washington. Success is to be measured not so much by the position that one has reached in life as by the obstacles overcome while trying to succeed. This is why we all love a good underdog story, right? Oh, this is really cool on past performance versus future potential. It's a mistake to judge people solely by the heights they've reached. By favoring applicants who have already excelled, selection systems underestimate and overlook candidates who are capable of greater things. When we confuse past performance with future potential, we miss out on people whose achievements have involved overcoming major obstacles. We need to consider how steep their slope was, how far they've climbed, and how they've grown along the way. The test of a diamond in the rough is not whether it shines from the start, but how it responds to heat or pressure. Now, I know this quote sounds good, but this is going to break your brain even further. So, beyond college degrees, many managers turn to prior experience to get an initial sense of candidates' qualifications, but it turns out that the amount of experience is also borderline irrelevant. In a meta-analysis of 44 studies with over 11,000 people across a wide range of jobs, prior work experience had virtually no bearing on performance. A candidate with 20 years of experience on a resume may have just repeated the same year of experience 20 times. So you need experience to get a job, but you need a job to get experience. And that experience reveals a little about your potential. The key question is not how long people have done a job, it's how well they can learn to do a job. Now, the one nuance here is that past performance is only helpful if the new job requires similar skills to the old one. The reason that line right there, it's how well they can learn to do a job. This is becoming more and more and more apparent across top CEOs of the biggest companies you can think of who are being asked about their hiring philosophies, and they're revealing in little ways that this is what they value. They value somebody who can learn. They understand how they learn. They know how to learn new things. They're not scared of that, right? There's two types of reactions to it, right? People who are scared of the learning and the discomfort and the change that it might cause, and people who are neutral or excited about the learning that it might, open them up to. So it's a very interesting to see all of these soft skills that we kind of knew to be true intuitively and that we kind of look for already, to see the research backing it up and to see more of it becoming normalized, especially at the top, right? Especially at companies and places like Meta, where, hey, you showing and demonstrating ability to go deep on one thing so that you've shown that you can learn how to learn, and that translates to other things pretty well, is something that Zuckerberg has said recently, right? That's wild that they don't really care about college degrees. They're not considering just college degrees anymore because they're looking for new brains, new talent, creativity, people who just haven't gotten the shot before, and people who can learn to do the job, right? And maybe they're not as entitled as somebody with a college degree. So it's super fascinating to see that happening, in the workforce. I'm curious to see how that will evolve, but I can only imagine it's going to get more and more towards some of these softer skills being the differentiator versus past qualifications or degrees and certifications. Now, the nuance I should say here, because there's a couple paragraphs down, past performance is only helpful if the new job requires similar skills to the old one. In a study of over 38,000 salespeople, economists found that the most successful salespeople were more likely to be promoted to manager, but sales skills aren't the same as managerial skills. And it basically goes down to how the people who closed the most deals, they were kind of the worst managerial people, and the people who were mediocre closers, they were the ones who were kind of the best managers. So that's just something to keep in mind. As I was explaining that, I want to give you that nuance there. I thought this one was pretty cool. It's time for universities and employers to add another metric. Along with the GPA, I think they should be assessing GPT, grade point trajectory. They can calculate the rate of improvement over time with basic division, rise over run. Early failure followed by later success is a mark of a hidden potential. Oh, I really love this quote by Langston Hughes in the epilogue. Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly. Okay, so this is on dreams. Then I came across new evidence that people with bigger dreams go on to achieve greater things. When economists track thousands of people from birth until age 55, The aspirations they formed as adolescents foreshadowed how their adult lives would unfold. Young people with grander dreams went further in school and climbed higher at work, even after accounting for a host of other factors: their cognitive skills, character skills, family income, and parents' education, occupations, and aspirations. Their own dreams made a unique contribution to how they progressed and who they became. I think that is a good enough excuse for you to dream more and dream. Oh, here's a cool distinction between imposter syndrome and growth mindset. So imposter syndrome says, I don't know what I'm doing. It's only a matter of time until everyone finds out. Growth mindset says, I don't know what I'm doing yet. It's only a matter of time until I figure it out. Not long ago, it dawned on me that imposter syndrome is a paradox. Others believe in you, you don't believe in yourself, yet you believe yourself instead of them. If you doubt yourself, shouldn't you also doubt your low opinion of yourself? And I think it's really cool how he goes on to say, I now believe that imposter syndrome is a sign of hidden potential. It feels like other people are overestimating you, but it's more likely that you are underestimating yourself. They recognize a capacity for growth that you can't see yet. When multiple people believe in you, it might be time to believe them. Many people dream of achieving goals. They measure their progress by the status they acquire and the accolades they collect, but the gains that count the most are the hardest to count. The most meaningful growth is not building our careers, it's building our character. Success is more than reaching our goals, it's living our values. There's no higher value than aspiring to be better tomorrow than we are today. There's no greater accomplishment than unleashing our hidden potential. By the way, that was the closer to the book. I think that's such a powerful closer, isn't it? There's no higher value than aspiring to be better tomorrow than we are today. And there's no greater accomplishment than unleashing our hidden potential. I hope this was as fun for you as it was for me, and I hope this left you with some things to think about. How cool is it that you might be sitting on several skills right now that are like $1 million skills, right? But the fact that they have not been nurtured, they haven't been tapped into, they haven't been, given. This book was definitely worth reading front to back. It's definitely worth going back to and highlighting. I hope you check it out if you enjoyed this. Make sure to check out the full book if you enjoyed this. I'll have all the links in the description below, but it's called Hidden Potential: The Science of Achieving Greater Things by Adam Grant. And make sure to check out some of the other tools and templates and things like that that are in the description below. I keep the latest free and paid stuff there, but I appreciate you taking the time. Make sure to rate, review, subscribe wherever you're at. That always helps a ton. And if you like this episode particularly, or the style of episode even, make sure to reach out and let me know. hi@habitchess.com. I would love to hear from you. Share it with somebody who might also enjoy it. Share it with somebody who will appreciate it and who it could help them uncover their hidden potential. So thank you again for taking the time, for hanging out. I'm excited to do more of these, and I will see you on the next one.